Hello, adventurer. It's good to see you. You have made it to the morning grind.
Welcome, welcome.
It's the live stream at the beginning of the Geekverse, where we talk about all types of topics in geekdom, gaming, and fantasy, with an emphasis on being constructive and creating the things that we want to exist in the world.
It's all on the grind, Sizemore. Can't be too fine, can't be too coarse.
That's exactly right. There are a lot of adventures to be had today. Dungeons to explore and monsters to slay, and who knows what a random encounter might send our way. That's why we have to prepare, so settle in now for the morning grind with your favorite beverage in hand.
Tea? Or maybe something a little stronger. I've got a few bottles of the old Wynyard left.
Whatever you want. Pull up a chair.
Dude.
If you're feeling fancy, how about a cappuccino? Or a frappuccino? Or how about an espresso?
Just tea, thank you.
Sounds good to me, Gandalf. Whatever you want. I'm just glad you're here.
Everyone is welcome. You can just watch if you want. You don't have to worship anything you don't want to worship.
Thank you, Mike. But be forewarned.
Sometimes we get really strange characters around here.
Wait, what's that you say? Why can't you come and be a part of the stream?
My wife would disown me.
Oh no, I bet she'll be fine with it. Come on in.
Am I scared for my safety? No.
What are we supposed to do?
Everybody do the secret handshake.
Okay. Secret cultist handshake.
Oh, now do wizards who love each other.
Yeah.
This, my friend, is a science.
I still don't have gifts, but it's fine.
It's all on the grind, son. Can't be too fine, can't be too coarse.
Dude, this would be a sick place to bring the band.
Indeed it would be, Dave. It really would. I'm seeing more people coming in. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Oh, look, here's someone new.
Is this the cultist meetup?
Yes it is.
Come to hang out? Please accept me. I have nothing else.
Okay, we accept you. Everyone's welcome here.
Brought some snacks.
Well, that makes things even better.
You want some coffee?
I don't drink coffee.
You sure? It's cultist coffee.
What makes it cultist coffee?
I'm a cultist and I'm drinking it.
Oh. Then I'll have some.
What exactly is going on here?
I'm seeing more people coming in. Welcome. It's so great to have you. Oh, and look, here comes another stranger.
Can we help you?
Yes, fellow cultists. I could really use some food.
Oh yeah? Welcome. We have donuts.
Oh, it's me. I'm glad I'm here. I'm sure you have a few questions for me, though.
What's your name? Who do you work for? What god do you worship?
Great questions, Rob.
I'm Steve King, and I worship Nyarlathotep.
No, not really. I'm just Heath, and I won't be worshiping anything this morning. But I will be your host. Welcome to the office. We're going to have a great time. I've got my coffee ready, because now it's time for the morning grind.
If you could become a fish, that would be amazing. Then I could command you with my mental fish powers.
Here I am. Good morning, James and Tomocrat. Hi, Mike and Stray. Oh, Stray, Tomocrat, one of my rare half days off. Well, welcome. I'm glad you're spending some of it here. Welcome. It's good to see everybody. We're going to be going on with GURPS Space today and seeing what is going on in the universe. We had a great discussion with it yesterday, starting with different kinds of sci-fi and what different types of sci-fi meant. And we just started talking about how, and then at the end, we started getting into maneuver drives and the rocket equation and how that might work. And so we are going to be continuing with different kinds of space travel today. So it is good to say, oh, here's Sable Phoenix and Neutromancer and Tell Us, everybody's here. And Lynn Spitz, right here. Good morning. Glad I finally caught this at the beginning instead of at the tail end or after it was over. Well, I'm glad you're here as well. So today we're going to say there's no live stream tonight because this afternoon I have been invited with my brother to go and my brother invited me over to play our first game, a 500-point game of Kings of War. And last night on the members only stream last night, we were discussing several things, including the 10 Candles RPG. We tried to assess some credibility of the UFO stuff going on. We didn't really think there was too much to that, apparently. But while I was doing that, I was finishing my Kings of War army. And so, come on, focus. And so finally, I did that. Focus. I got Northman Berserkers here. Both of these are based off of the A Song of Ice and Fire miniatures that I've had laying around forever because I thought I was going to get into that game, but I had them. And so I'm repurposing them to the Kings of War. So I've got Northman Berserkers here. I got a unit of Tully Foot Knights. Let's see if I can't force this to focus. There we go. Tully Foot Knights. Berserkers. I'm pretty proud of all these guys. Particularly even these Stark Footmen here. These guys, I think these guys look pretty cool. Stark Footmen. I got Tully Knights over here. You know, and in the past when I was like playing Warhammer Fantasy as a kid, I remembered, my perception was that painting an army was going to take like years. We were working on these armies for years. So this has been like 3 weeks of hobby time. So I think this is 3 weeks worth of hobby time well spent. It came up with these Stark Outriders. So this has come up with a pretty neat little army. So I'm going to try it out tonight. So no live stream tonight because there's actually going to be in-person gaming tonight for the first time in a while for me. So I'm going to go over to his house. He's been putting together some orcs, but we're going to try out. I think that this right here, these 2 units of infantry, this unit of berserkers right here, and I believe the unit of Tully cavalry right here. I believe these 4 units, that's like 495 points. So these 2 probably won't see action today. But we're going to try out a little 500-point game, which is these 4 units right here. So I think it's pretty fun. Yeah, let's breathe. Excuse me. Let's breathe and sip. Let's do that right now. Thank you for the reminder, Stray. So everybody got their favorite beverage this morning. Let's inhale. 2 deep breaths. Inhale, exhale, and then take a sip of our favorite beverage. So here we go. Just what we needed this morning. James says, you need to tell your brother he isn't just warring with you, but you've got the weight of an entire YouTube channel. I will tell him. He was cutting out bases last night out of a Manila folder and said, hey, if these orcs perform well, they'll get better than the Manila folder. But, hey, you know, and hey, I was also thinking you could also use these guys. You could potentially use the Kings of War system for like figuring out your AD&D battle or your role-playing game battle in general. I think it's a reasonably quick system, which is important. But, you know, hey, once you get to, what do they call it? Rank level or name level or something in D&D, and you're actually hiring mercenaries and things like that. Hey, these could be also perfectly great units of mercenaries or your retainers while you're moving on to domain level play. I think that would be fun. Tomocrat says, need to figure space travel time for UFOs to get here. We totally need to do that. Well, please, thank you for the Discord link as well, Stray. Please come and join the Discord server. Click the link and click the like button. Thank you. I'm proud of them. So I'm going to keep going because I do have 2 more units. I painted up some crossbowmen while I was painting. So I've got 2 units of crossbowmen, but I don't need them because we're only tonight because we're just doing 500 points. So if that's 500 points. But I got 2 units of crossbowmen, and I got to get together. And then that would probably get me to about 1,000 points worth of soldiers here. All right, let's go over here. Let's take that down. Let's go over here to... Hopefully they will fight well. And then what I want to do, I do want to do an undead army. I want to do an undead army. But the advantage of these guys over here was that they already came assembled. So the A Song of Ice and Fire miniatures, they were already assembled, so I didn't have to go through an assembly process. So all I had to do was sit down and paint. And the painting went pretty quickly. But all of my undead, like I really want to do like a skeleton army, something like a vampire count skeleton army. But when I got out all the skeletons that I had, they were just always in pieces. You know, they've got to be assembled because those things come in like a million little pieces. So that's going to be its own project, like assembling the whole army first. And then, so got other projects going on yesterday afternoon, and I've got projects to talk about. Hopefully the next project, that's going to be like a crowdfunding project. I've got a meeting on that tomorrow afternoon, so we will see. Tomocrat says, I would like to do a dwarfs army. I think I've got a nephew. We're still trying to get the nephews involved. So my brother and I are going to play. The nephews will be over there. We're going to try to get the nephews interested. They sat down and played when we did our little test game with a couple of units the other day while we were painting. So hopefully we're going to try to make this look cool. And see if I can get the nephews involved. And one of the nephews said he would like dwarves. Skeletons can paint up really quick with a base coat and a dry brush. That's part of what I was thinking with it. First of all, I think they would look pretty cool. But yes, supposedly they'd paint fast. Hey, Zero the Blade, good morning. All right, let's pull up this here. We were talking about sample, I think, like 32 sample delta V requirements. Okay, so I think this is where we were. Speculative rocket types. Yeah, we've talked about speculative rocket types as well. Total conversion drive. So sales. Given the limitation imposed by carrying reaction mass, any method of interplanetary travel or interstellar travel that doesn't involve rockets might have an advantage. There are several reactionless drive concepts that don't require large quantities of reaction mass. So if we're trying to get something, hey, good morning, Rogue Faker. So if we're trying to get someplace, but we don't want to have to carry reaction mass, well, light sails might work. So one drive that has been proposed is the light sail. A light sail is a huge sheet of very thin, light, reflective material, possibly hundreds of square miles in area. The sail is attached to a payload capsule by a network of lightweight cables. Close to a star, the sail can provide slow but steady acceleration due to the pressure of starlight. Is it going to let us calculate how large the sail would need to be? On its own, a light sail is only effective close to a star, such as between the orbits of Mercury and Mars and our own solar system. Oh, so that's pretty close. That does include Earth, but Mercury to Mars. More than a few AU from Sol, the light pressure drops to below useful levels. This would seem to make light sails useless for interstellar travel. Okay, well, that sucks. However, a powerful laser or battery of lasers could be used to impart steady thrust to a light sail. Oh, I remember people talking about this. Laser light doesn't lose force as quickly with distance to a non-directional starlight, so it can provide thrust for months or years, accelerating the sail to a significant fraction of light speed. This provides limited maneuverability, but if the sail is given an electrical charge, interactions with the galactic magnetic field can be used for deceleration or a slow turn. Tomocrat says, NASA, I think, has been thinking about trying this for probes. The laser thing, I bet that's where I heard about that, because I remember the sail and then hitting it with a laser and making the laser accelerate it. A laser-driven light sail seems almost perfect for interstellar travel. There's no fuel to worry about, and the engine can be left at home. On the other hand, the laser batteries would need to be enormously powerful. Even a tiny probe massing a few kilograms would need gigawatts of outputs of lasers. Okay, so our problem is we're not going to be doing this with like a, you're not going to be accelerating a spacecraft then with like a laser pointer. Even a tiny probe massed a few kilograms would need a gigawatt output lasers. A sizable manned ship would need lasers with lenses many miles across, powered by solar collectors thousands of miles wide, using thousands of times as much power as currently generated all over Earth. Okay, well, now this sounds like we're getting a problem. There's a problem with every one of these, right? Isaac Arthur covers laser-driven interstellar travel with light sails in depth on his channel. Ignoring the question of whether it would be feasible to build lasers that big, it's likely that a society capable of it would find other uses for the power generating capacity. Meanwhile, the political questions are significant. An interstellar journey would need to take decades, and the crew would need to be able to trust its home base to keep the lasers on for that whole time. For that matter, the lasers themselves could serve as a terribly powerful weapon, which itself could be the cause of conflict. For a superb treatment of interstellar light sail travel, see the classic novel The Mote in God's Eye by Larry Niven and Jerry Purnell. Robert Forward's novel Flight of the Dragonfly also relies on light sails as a pilot device, and some printings include an extensive technical appendix. So another concept that might be useful for interplanetary travel is the magnetic sail. Stars like Sol just don't emit light. They also give off a powerful solar wind of charged particles. These fast protons and electrons fly through the inner solar system at hundreds of miles per second. If they enter a magnetic field, they change direction and speed, exerting a force on whatever is generating the field. A spaceship might use a large loop of superconductive wire as a sail, passing current through the wire to generate a powerful magnetic field, interact with the solar wind, and produce thrust. Magnetic sails have several advantages over light sails. Calculations have shown that the magnetic sail can yield a higher thrust to mass ratio than a light sail. A magnetic sail can tack against solar wind, and so is more maneuverable than a light sail. A magnetic sail can also interact with the magnetic field of planets, providing even more maneuverability in certain situations. Finally, a magnetic sail will be very good at decelerating a ship moving in a large fraction of the speed of light. It might be the most likely method for stopping a hard science interstellar spacecraft. All right, what are the disadvantages, though? I see Mote in God's Eye mentioned there. Best first contact ever, Sable says. Let's see. I wonder if they'll mention hypervelocity tether rockets. We will see. Yeah, I know. The GURPS space, and also I was looking, we do have the spaceships book too. It really explains it all. So what's the problem with this type of sail? Of course, one disadvantage to the magnetic sail is the material of the sail itself. It may be difficult to produce long loops of superconductive wire that can stand up to the rigors of spaceflight. Magnetic sails, like light sails, lose effectiveness with distance from the star. A related concept is the plasma sail, in which the magnetic field is conducted within a thin, superheated cloud of plasma rather than a loop of wire. A plasma sail would require fuel, since the thin cloud of plasma would tend to disperse and would need to be replenished. Even so, early research indicates the plasma sail system would be very fuel efficient and would require relatively little power. One advantage of plasma sails is the sail expands automatically as the density of the solar wind decreases. The plasma sail should provide nearly constant acceleration all the way out to the heliopause, the boundary where the solar wind fades into the interstellar medium. This makes it a good candidate for travel to the outer solar system, where light sails and fixed-sized magnetic sails lose their effectiveness. So that's still not interstellar, but that would be inter-solar system. Plasma sails to get you out to the solar system. Isaac does lots of cool hypothetical science breakdowns, like necessary sizes of generation ships. We're about to talk about generation ships, I think. What would happen if the sun went out? Great inspirational materials. Okay, catapults and tethers. Okay, well, buzzard ramjets. Let's see. I like the call outs here, or the boxes. These are often fun. So the buzzard ramjet was first proposed in the 1960s, and for a time was regarded as the definitive answer to the problem of STL interstellar travel. A buzzard ramjet starship carries almost no reaction mass. Instead, it uses a big magnetic field, a ram scoop, to gather interstellar hydrogen. The hydrogen is funneled in, used as fuel for the ship's fusion reactor, and expelled as reaction mass. Once a ramjet reaches speeds high enough to gather plenty of hydrogen, it can theoretically accelerate indefinitely, approaching light speed as closely as desired. In the 1970s, a great deal of science fiction was written in which Bussard ramjet drives, combined with a realistic time dilation, allowed humanity to explore and colonize the galaxy. Unfortunately, the concept appears to have insurmountable technical problems. The interstellar medium turns out not to be as dense as was originally believed, especially in the vicinity of our solar system, which is in the middle of a parsecs-wide bubble of thinner gas. Well, that sucks. This means the necessary ram scoop sizes would be prohibitively large. Meanwhile, once a ramjet ship reaches very high speeds, much of the energy of the fusion reaction goes to accelerate the incoming reaction mass rather than the ship. Finally, the proton-proton fusion reaction that would be needed to drive the ship turns out to be difficult to achieve. A science fiction setting could still use the Bussard ramjet as its primary star drive, especially if it was set in a region of the galaxy where interstellar matter was dense. A ram scoop could be used to supplement a conventional fusion drive, gathering extra reaction mass while the ship coasts through interstellar space. Oh, I like that idea. Interstellar is within a single star system. Intergalactic is within a single galaxy, but can involve multiple star systems. So did I say that wrong? Was I talking about extrastellar then? Or intra? No. This says that although they look similar, so Merriam-Webster says the prefix intra means within, as in happening within a single thing, while the prefix inter means between. That was my understanding. So, interstellar. Yeah, like interstellars, between stars. Intrastellar. That might be, yeah. Interstellar space is past the heliopause. Right, yeah, that's what I thought. Catapults and tethers. So here we've got this. Space engineers have invented several other potential techniques for reaching space or for maneuvering in space. These are not necessarily useful for very long-range travel, but they can assist in maneuvering without needing reaction mass or expensive onboard systems. Catapults. Low tech level space travel often involves a burst of acceleration at the beginning of the journey, followed by a long period of coasting along a ballistic trajectory with another burst of acceleration at the destination. Burst of acceleration at the destination. A rocket-driven ship normally needs to supply reaction mass for both periods of sharp acceleration. If another way can be found to provide the first burst of acceleration, this can cut the reaction mass requirement by 50% or more. One approach to this problem is the launch catapult. A launch catapult is an electromagnetic system or mass driver similar to some particle accelerator devices, but built on a much larger scale. Many powerful electron magnets are arranged in a long line wrapped around a hollow channel in which a payload can move freely. The payload is either made of ferrous material components or wrapped in a conductive sheath. Once the payload is placed at the start of the channel, the electromagnets are activated in a series, each magnet pulling the payload forward and accelerating it. A launch catapult may be many miles long, accelerating a payload to very high velocities. A launch catapult built on the surface of the world can use to accelerate a payload to orbital velocity. In space, a launch catapult can give a payload the initial acceleration needed for an interplanetary journey. In either cases, the payload needs no rocket engines. The power needed for the acceleration comes from the power plant built into the catapult. This could be a fun idea to work with, too. Stray says, in Traveler, they need to cover the windows and warp so people don't go mad. We don't know what's in warp space. I think we're talking about, GURPS is going to talk about warp here too, because or warp, no, hyperspace. It talks about that in hyperspace. You could do a sci-fi game where, yeah, when you go into hyperspace, Well, yeah, you could have all kinds of craziness out there. What you're dealing with while you're in hyperspace. It's even possible for a launch catapult to operate in reverse. A payload or ship that enters the launch end of the catapult can be decelerated by the electromagnets firing in the series, bringing the payload to rest relative to the catapult. If launch catapults are present at both ends of an interplanetary journey, a ship may make the trip with a very small onboard supply of reaction mass. That's interesting. A major drawback of the launch catapult is that it may be unsafe for human passengers. Well, and first of all, you also have to be sure that you can actually get immediately into the launch end of your catapult on the other side. A major drawback of a launch catapult is that it may be unsafe for human passengers. In space, a launch catapult can be very long, providing useful velocities while applying only moderate acceleration. That's how I was thinking it would be used. But on a planet or large moon, building a launch catapult more than a few miles long might be a serious engineering challenge. Short of a launch catapult, such a short launch catapult can still provide the needed velocities, but it must apply very high acceleration over a short time. Human cargo may need to use other means of reaching orbit. But you could do that like a satellite launch cannon. Lots of RPGs use hyperspace as a Cthulhu thing, like Event Horizon. That's what I was thinking. You find Cthulhu in hyperspace. Sounds like the mass rail system, Tomocrat says. Rogue Thinker says, just use a maglev sled to accelerate the rocket for the first 1,000 kilometers per hour. So cycler stations. One alternative to conventional spacecraft teleportation is the cycler station. A station is a space habitat that follows a trajectory passing near two or more interesting places. Over a long period, the cycler follows such a loop, with passengers embarking and disembarking at each destination. At each port of call, the cycler uses a planet's or star's gravity and some minor assistance from a propulsion system to change course for the next without stopping. On an interplanetary scale, cycler stations follow low-energy transfer orbits between worlds. On an interstellar scale, a station could travel a substantial fraction of the speed of light, changing course at each star to follow a wide loop through interstellar space. Cycler stations are designed primarily to provide a livable habitat for passengers during a long passage. An Earth-Mars cycler would need about 3 years to make one round trip. An interstellar cycler would need decades. Since the delta V requirements for a cycle are the same, indeed, because the course change slightly larger, then for some trips without the cycler, there's no advantage in carrying space-worthy cargo this way. The benefit of a cycler station is the equipment needed only on the voyage between worlds. The benefit of a cycler station is that the equipment needed only on the voyage between worlds, life support, heavy radiation shielding, and so on, does not need to be repeatedly accelerated. Passengers boarding or leaving the cycler will still need to bring along the same delta V that they would need in order to make the trip without it. On the other hand, they won't need to bring along their own, possibly very heavy and expensive life support systems with capacity for the whole trip. This is a good book. But Babylon 5 uses hyperspace as a shortcut. Lynn says, one thing they don't address here is that a space-based mass driver is going to be accelerated backwards with the same energy as the payload going forward. Station keeping could get awkward. Oh, that's a good point. If you've got this floating launch cannon, that's an advantage to having it attached to the planet, right? B5's hyperspace is a good plot travel system. So tethers, is this what you were talking about, Sable Phoenix? Oh, you're thinking of a railgun. Mass drivers do not have recoil? Really? This is accelerating. So what we're looking at? Oh, launch catapult. So this is done by many powerful electromagnets are arranged along a line wrapped around a hollow channel where a payload can move frequently. Difference between railgun and mass driver. That might be a good question for ChatGPT. A railgun and a mass driver are both electromagnetic launch systems, but they typically used for different purposes and operate on slightly different principles. A railgun uses a pair of parallel conductors rails along which a sliding armature is accelerated by the electromagnetic effect of a current that flows down one rail into the armature and then back along the other rail. The rails and the armature form an electrical circuit. The magnetic field generated by the high current flowing through the rails pushes the armature along the rails. Railguns are typically envisioned for military applications, specifically for launching projectiles at very high speeds without the use of conventional explosives. A mass driver is a proposed method of non-rocket spacecraft launch, which would use a linear motion to accelerate payloads to high speeds. Mass drivers work on a similar electromagnetic principle as railguns, but the difference lies in the payload and the application. Mass drivers are intended to hurl chunks of matter or spacecraft into space, either for the purpose of sending materials to other places in the solar system or for launching spacecraft without the need for rockets. Okay, so this just said, so according to ChatGPT, they operate on similar principles, but the mass difference lies in their application and their payloads are designed to launch. Okay, so that's what now Sable Phoenix says. Well, technically, a railgun is a type of mass driver. A coil gun or Gauss rifle is the type of mass driver that has no recoil. Okay, so we do need to think. So we potentially have to think about that because I thought that. So a coil gun. What is a coil gun? That's probably an Ultratech. A coil gun, also known as a Gauss gun, is a type of projectile accelerator that uses electromagnetic coils to accelerate a magnetic projectile to a high velocity. It's a type of electromagnetic launcher, but is different from a railgun, which uses a different electromagnetic mechanism. See, that's interesting because I didn't know that. I would have described so a coil gun, and a coil gun is also known as a Gauss gun. It's a type of electromagnetic launcher that's different from a railgun, which uses a different electromagnetic mechanism. So both railguns and Gauss guns are types of electromagnetic launchers. In a coil gun, the coils are arranged along the barrel. The coils are energized in a sequenced manner to create a moving electromagnetic field that moves the projectile along the band. Let me say that again. In a coil gun, the coils are arranged along a barrel, which is what this is describing over here. So this catapult over here is describing basically a large coil gun. Then many powerful magnets are arranged along in a long line wrapped around the hollow channel, along which the payload can move freely. So that's what we've got over here. In a coil gun, coils are arranged along the barrel. The coils are energized in a sequenced manner to create a moving electromagnetic field that pulls the projectile along the barrel. Each coil is switched off as the projectile approaches it, so the magnetic field doesn't pull it back once it is passed along the center of the coil. The sequencing of the coils allows the projectile to continuously accelerate along the barrel of the coil gun. Don't people sometimes make these on YouTube? Like as hobby projects? The mechanism could potentially be used for a variety of applications ranging from military to space launches. As of my knowledge, cut off in September 2001, coil guns are still largely experimental and haven't been widely adopted in practice. The technology has potential, but faces challenges related to power requirements, efficiency, and wear and tear on components. But that shouldn't have recoil, right? Sable Phoenix says rail guns require contact of the payload with the rails, hence equal and opposite reaction. Coil guns never touch the payload. The payload just falls through the alternating current fields. Okay, so I guess then actually, technically, I guess I'd heard about rail guns, but I suppose then I had also always been confusing what they're calling coil guns here with rail guns. Or I guess I might have also called a rail gun like a Gauss cannon. Okay, but they're different. Now, we've got functional coil gun firearms. Well, not firearms, but handheld weaponry already. It achieves velocities comparable to an air rifle. Forgotten Weapons has done a video of firing it. Huh. All right, so there we go. So now we know. All right, learning stuff here on this channel. Okay, let's go back over here. Our collective minds. Okay, now to tethers. Maybe this is what Sable Phoenix was talking about. Another sophisticated maneuver system involves tethers. A tether system can be used to assist payloads into high planetary orbit, reducing the amount of reaction mass needed for a rocket drive. A tether station is placed in orbit around a planet with a strong magnetic field. It lowers a tether cable and begins to rotate, so the tether is moving much more slowly than the orbital. It lowers a tether cable, okay, and begins to rotate, so the tether is moving much more slowly than the station's orbital velocity at the bottom of its swing. At this speed, it can intercept payloads that have been launched into suborbital trajectory, one that requires much less reaction mass than a true orbital path. The payload is attached to the tether with a grapple. When the tether swings upward, it can throw the payload higher into orbit. Huh, I don't think I've ever heard of this before at all. Every time a payload is transferred into high orbit with the system, the tether station is robbed of some of its momentum and will tend to fall into lower orbit. However, the tether itself can be used to restore the station's orbital velocity. An onboard power plant can drive electrical current along the tether cable. Since the tether is moving through a planet's magnetic field, the current provides thrust, exactly like the operation of an electrical motor. The station rises to its standard orbit once again and is ready to deal with the next payload that comes along. That sounds neat. You know, I did watch Space Above and Beyond, that the trailer for that, because I had said yesterday that if I were to write a sci-fi kind of world where you're dealing with aliens, I think it would be fun to deal with a situation where humanity is basically defending the solar system, and which is apparently what that show was about. Looked pretty cool, but I think I would also want it to have some of these different types of things, not just a rocket, but one of these tether systems. That sounds pretty cool. Or having launching stuff with a launch catapult. Do some of these more non-standard types of space travel. Lynn says, I think these are also called sky hooks. Sable Phoenix says, if you have advanced space-age material science, you can also use a smaller enclosed version of a hypervelocity tether rocket as an internal gyroscopic reaction mass driver for starships. Oh. That has messed up the tether system. So tether systems are useful only for orbital transfer, but since the situations are extremely common, they are likely to find frequent application. Although they require a planetary magnetic field to operate efficiently, this isn't a major limitation. Most Earth-like worlds will have sufficient magnetic fields. Gas giants would also have powerful magnetic fields, so operation in the close vicinity of a gas giant may also find tether systems useful. All right, now we get to reactionless drives. A reactionless drive is one that provides acceleration without discarding reaction mass. How do we do that? So this is getting away from our rocket formula, right? Tomocrat sounds like you would need some good math to hit the payload. Well, you also need good math to make sure that you hit the end of your receiving launch cannon. Oh, we got relativity effects over here. Okay, so a reactionless drive requires power and fuel for the power plant, but is not limited by needing to carry around vast amounts of reaction mass. A reactionless drive starship can be extremely efficient carrying a large payload. Unless the physical principles behind the drive stop working at high velocity, a reactionless drive ship can easily approach light speed. All reactionless drives are super science since they violate the known laws of physics. Okay, so that's important from our world building standpoint. All reactionless drives are super science since they violate the known laws of physics. If reactionless drives are available in a setting, the GM should define their importance. The most important factor to consider is the thrust to mass ratio. If 1 ton of reactionless drives can deliver only 1/10 of a ton of thrust, if 1 ton of reactionless drives can deliver only 1/10 of a ton of thrust, then starships will only be able to manage accelerations up to about 1/10 g with almost no payload. If 1 ton of drives can deliver 2 to 5 tons of thrust, then accelerations of 2 to 5 g's can be obtained. A Dean drive. A Dean drive is a class of reactionless drives that somehow converts rotary movements into linear movements. The ship's onboard engine includes a big flywheel that is driven by a power plant. The angular momentum of the flywheel can be tapped to accelerate the ship forward. The Dean drive was invented in the 1950s and was taken seriously by a few people in the science fiction community. Unfortunately, it was never demonstrated for or duplicated by a reputable scientist and was almost certainly a hoax. In fact, the Dean drive violates several known laws of physics. Dean drives can be used as a generic term for any reactionless drive that works by breaking the laws of motion as we currently understand them. Oh, so somebody demonstrated one? Hang on, let me look that up. Dean drive. Oh, when it says that it was invented, I thought it was talking about just somebody had written about it in a science fiction story. But he said, no, the Dean drive was a device created and promoted by inventor Norman Dean that he claimed to be a reactionless drive. Dean claimed that his device was able to generate a unidirectional force in free space in violation of Newton's third law of motion from classical physics. He claimed his claims generated notoriety because, if true, such a device would have had enormous applications, completely changing human transport, engineering, space travel, and more. Dean made several controlled private demonstrations of a number of different devices. However, no working models were ever demonstrated publicly or subjected to independent analysis. And Dean never presented any rigorous theoretical basis for their operation. So if you could do it, then you can run with it in a science fiction setting. But, okay, so nobody was ever actually able to do that. Dean was granted 2 U.S. patents on mechanical devices, presumably related to Dean's drive claims. I like using things like this, though, for storytelling. This is the kind of stuff that I think would be fun, because there's all kinds of things like this that, oh, somebody was able to demonstrate this, and here's it working in 1972 or 1950s or whenever it was. And then it got taken over, but actually taken to the secret facility and turned into a starship. I think that kind of stuff is fun for storytelling. Great storytelling material. The history of the Dean drive is fascinating, Len says. So actually, here's this picture right here. Let me show you this picture. So here he is. This is inventor Norman L. Dean beside one of his Dean drive apparatuses. So here he is with this, trying to show this getting it work. John W. Campbell was a huge supporter of it. So that's supposedly what it looked like. Like I said, I think that kind of stuff is great for fantasy and science fiction storytelling. Little stories like that. So that's why it says Dean drives is a class of reactionist drives that somehow converts rotary momentum into linear movement. So if you did have an onboard engine that was a big flywheel, and somehow you could convert the rotary movement of that into the linear thrust, then you would have something. You wouldn't need reaction mass. That's really interesting. You just have to figure out how to do that. Sable Phoenix says you can't demonstrate a reactionist system unless it's disconnected from the ground. Otherwise, the planet Earth is your reaction mass. Yeah, when you're pushing against the Earth. Hey, good morning. Lynn says, everything is easy when you know how. Yes. So diametric drives. Another form of reactionless drive is the diametric drive. Such a drive creates an asymmetrical field of force around itself. The side of the force field that exerts more force on the ship will push the ship forward without any need for reaction mass. Most diametric drive concepts involve manipulating gravity, since that force operates equally on all matter and can provide smooth acceleration. A bias drive or gravity drive is a diametric drive that alters the force of gravity ahead and behind the ship. In effect, the ship exists in its own bubble of space-time with its own arbitrary gravity. The ship is in free fall and doesn't feel acceleration, so it can safely pull hundreds of Gs. The speed of light is still an absolute limit. Diametric drives are completely speculative. At present, we have no idea how to create the kind of force fields they require. They are similar in function to warp drives and may be a spin-off of the technology if it exists in the setting. Meanwhile, bias drives depend on fine control of gravity. They may be associated with artificial gravity or contragravity technologies. Okay, let's see what it says about relativity effects here. Then we go to generation ships. Einstein's laws of motion have several surprising effects, especially as an object such as a starship accelerates close to the speed of light. As seen by an unaccelerated outside observer, the starship becomes shorter and more massive. From the starship's viewpoint, images of the outside universe become compressed toward the axis of motion. Light from ahead becomes blue shifted toward more energetic frequencies, while light behind becomes red shifted down to the momentum. You could technically use Coriolis force as a reactionless drive. Please do hit the like button. Yep. Well, that sounds like, yeah, it sounds like that's where it's going with this warp drive. The problem is that we could actually build the Alcubierre drive, but we'd be blasting everything in front of the ship with levels of radiation that puts a pulsar to shame. Not exactly friendly to anything living in the entire star system you're entering. That they do not want the Enterprise to arrive. We're on our way. No, please don't. So one of the most important effects of relativistic velocity, especially from the point of view of interstellar travel, is time dilation. Anyone on board a ship will experience the passage of time differently than anyone in an unaccelerated frame of reference, say on a planet. In effect, his clock will run more slowly than those in the outside universe, so the trip seems to take less time. STL starships can use time dilation to make manned interstellar travel more practical. Crewmen and passengers won't need to spend so much of their lifespan to make the journey. To compute the degree of time dilation, use the following formula. R is equal to the square root of 1 minus V divided by C squared. Here, R is the time rate experienced on board the ship, which we're trying to figure out here. Time rate experienced on board the ship. V is the ship's velocity, and c is the speed of light. So the square root of 1 minus the velocity of the spaceship divided by the speed of light squared. That gives you the time rate experienced on board the ship. So here's our velocity as a speed of c, and here's the time rate experienced on board the spacecraft. So at a quarter of the speed of light, you're getting some time dilation, but not a whole lot, 0.968. But then as we continue to approach the speed of light, let's see, 50% the speed of light, you're experiencing time at like 86.6%. And then, man, as you get really close to the speed of light, it starts to become more and more dramatic. But even at 90% of the speed of light, you're experiencing time at 43.3% time rate. And then really slowing down to just over or just under 1.5% at 0.9999% the speed of light. Time dilation is weird. A great science fiction novel that does not hand-wave relativity is The Singularity Sky by Charles Stross. Now, doesn't Ender's Game use relativity? I read that a long time ago. And it has people... It has somebody like intentionally traveling at a high velocity in order to endure and live longer, right? See, it's based on your velocity. Yeah, it's based on velocity. It's not acceleration, because I was trying to think. So something like a warp drive doesn't help you here, right? Because you could have a situation where you don't experience a whole bunch of acceleration theoretically, but you'd still be experiencing velocity. And it's the velocity here that matters. That's a tough one. That's a tough one. Should be v squared over... Oh, okay, so yeah. Okay, so generational ships. One realistic approach to interstellar travel. I also think this would be, I'm sure lots of people, I know lots of people have done this, but I think that some interesting story on board a generational ship would be neat. One realistic approach to interstellar travel is to accept that it will take a long time and plan for it. A generation ship is a starship that uses nothing but a maneuver drive to cross interstellar distances, requiring decades or centuries to make the trip and providing a livable habitat for crew and passengers along the way. A generation ship isn't so much a ship as a mobile world with its own internal society. Adventurers aboard such a ship will almost be entirely dominated by character interaction as crew and passengers while away the years before reaching their destination. In fact, children are likely to be born, grow up, and have children of their own during the journey, yielding several generations of passengers, hence the name for this kind of ship. The variant on this generation ship idea is the sleeper ship, the slow starship that carries its crew and passengers in some form of suspended animation. Science fiction from the 1960s and 70s often assumed that interstellar journeys would be taken with most of the crew and passengers in cold sleep, a form of artificial hibernation. Some current science fiction suggests that human crew and passengers might travel in digital storage. Nanotechnology and advanced computers might make it possible to transport a human's body and make it a body and mind as pure data. If the data describing a ship's crew and passengers can be stored very compactly, the ship carrying it can be much smaller and cheaper than the one carrying living people. A ship might even be able to provide a virtual environment in which the passengers can live while in storage. Of course, this kind of ghost life is possible. If this kind of ghost life is possible in the first place, why would the ship's passengers have bothered to travel anywhere? Sableman says, I need a shirt that says my spirit animal, Steve Urkel. Paul Anderson did the digital travel thing decades ago in the Vortrekkers. Okay, so star drives. So now we get to star drives. Interplanetary travel is not only possible but practical given technologies that we already know how to build. Interstellar travel is a very different matter. The fundamental problem faced by anyone planning interstellar travel is Einstein's theory of relativity. Einstein's model of the physical universe, one of the most successful theories of all time, assumed that the speed of light is an absolute limit. See Relativity Effects, page 36. All objects with mass must travel at lower speeds, unable to accelerate to light speed no matter how much energy they apply. This means that starships will always take years to travel between neighboring stars. Ever since it becomes obvious there are no other habitable worlds or alien civilizations, within our own solar system, hence science fiction writers have turned to other stars as settings for adventure. This almost demands that the heroes of the story have some method for traveling faster than light. Thus, many writers who are otherwise quite rigorous with their scientific content have invented some form of FTL, faster than light travel. STL, that was slower than light. Scientific speculation and science fiction have considered a bewildering variety of faster than light drives. All of them should be considered super science, though a few might have some justification in cutting edge physics. Most science fiction universes only permit one form of faster than light travel, although a few use multiple forms, each with its own advantages and problems. Some of the most common forms are as follows. How could we do this? Sable Phoenix says, so despite the ghost life argument, there's still a good rebuttal for establishing server farms in other worlds. Yeah, I mean, when you've successfully colonized an extrasolar system, you've immediately doubled the survival rate of your entire species. The moon smells like gunpowder? I mean, that's one reason why Elon Musk talks about colonizing Mars, right? Now, that's not getting onto another solar system. Okay, so a hyperdrive. Einstein's model applies to the physical universe that we live in. But what if there's another universe where different laws apply, a universe that can be reached from ours? A starship could drop into that hyperspace, travel there according to its own laws, and then shift back into our universe at a new location, reaching its destination much faster than Einstein would normally allow. When thinking about a hyperdrive for a space setting, some things to consider are, how fast is the drive? Does the starship take weeks or months to travel through hyperspace between two stars? Or does the trip take a fraction of a second? The GM will want to consider how quick a ship can cross known space. How quickly can the drive be used? It is important for dramatic reasons. This is important for dramatic reasons. If a hyperdrive can be used quickly and easily, a starship can always escape from trouble. Perhaps the drive requires a great deal of energy to make the shift into hyperspace, requiring long periods of charging the ship's engine from the power plant. Perhaps planning a trip through hyperspace requires a lot of computer power or time. Or perhaps hyperspace needs to relax after the stress of being crossed, ensuring that new hyperspace transitions can't be made too quickly after emerging from normal space. How finely can the drive be controlled? Unless a hyperdrive ship can choose any point of emergence at once, it will still need a maneuver drive to reach nearby planets or engage in space battles. Maybe hyperdrives can't be used within a system within a certain distance of a huge mass, requiring starships to travel out to flat space before entering hyperspace. What is hyperspace like? Perhaps this is what we were talking about earlier, right? There could be Cthulhu out there. Perhaps the shifts in hyperspace are cut off from everything, including each other. Perhaps ships in hyperspace are cut off from everything, including each other and the normal universe. A trip through hyperspace could be a good time to do onboard ship maintenance and have locked room adventures in which none of the members can get away from each other. Perhaps ships in hyperspace communicate with other ships or with planetary facilities. Or perhaps hyperspace is a real place with its own geography and even its own natives. Ships can explore it using special sensors, hover or change directions in hyperspace, or even fight battles there. Can a ship in hyperspace be detected? If a ship can't interact with the normal universe, then nothing in normal space can detect them until they emerge. That means that battle lines won't exist in a universe with hyperspace. Invasion fleets won't be detected until they emerge, already close to their targets. On the other hand, if special sensors can reach out into hyperspace, invaders will be detected in advance and could possibly be met in hyperspace itself. Yeah, that's an interesting thought. So Star Wars uses this, right? So when they're going into battle, they just hop into hyperspace and then hop out at their location. I had never really thought about that for the implications of like defenses, that you wouldn't have battle lines, because if you can pop into hyperspace and then pop back out close to the planet of attack, that is important to think about from your world building. What happens if a hyperdrive fails? If a ship in hyperspace is damaged, does it return to its starting point? Does it drop back into normal space at an unpredictable point? Or is it stranded in hyperspace until the drive can be repaired? This can be particularly critical if ships can fight battles in hyperspace. A hypersail. What if hyperspace is like an ocean with ocean energy currents and reefs and storms on which a ship can ride? Such a ship might need hypersails, more likely to be energy fields rather than physical sails, to take advantage of the ether's flow. David Weber's Honor Harrington novels used this mode for hyperspace, deliberately mimicking the flavor of sea adventures set in the Napoleonic era. Tachyon drives. Physics predicts the existence of tachyons, fundamental particles that can't travel less than the speed of light. A tachyon drive turns the starship into a beam of tachyons that then hurtles across space. That sounds safe. A ship that is converted into tachyons might require a receiving station to restore it to its original condition. I like the function of KF drives from Battletech. You have to go to the perigee or apogee of a star to jump, unless you're using a risky pirate point that comes and goes as the planets orbit. The drive just immediately transitions you without crossing the intervening distance. A neat nod to relativity is that the jump can be detected at the destination before the ship actually jumps. Lynn says, I put a restriction on entry-exit to hyperspace in one of my games. You have to be near a large mass like a star. Planets aren't massive enough, so it makes systems somewhat defensible. So in that one, you're using the mass of the great mass of the star to help you get into hyperspace, or get into and get out of. All right, a jump drive. It's not possible for a physical object to accelerate to speeds faster than that of light. But what if it's possible for a ship to move from point A to point B in space without accelerating and without crossing the space between? A jump drive permits a starship to teleport from one location to another. Is that basically what we were just talking about here? The drive just immediately, so the function of the KF drives, yeah, it sounds like a jump drive. Tomocrat says, Star Wars hyperspace talks of shadows of real space, so they can't jump near worlds that have gravity. Though the terrible episode 9 shattered that, but I don't consider 7 to 9 canon. So that's the opposite. Yeah, Daniel says, requiring an energy or gravity well. Good idea. Yeah, so it could be either way. You either got to be away from one or you got to be close to one. And then you got to use your maneuver drive to get from wherever those places are to your final destination. So a jump drive permits a starship to teleport from one location to another, usually in no more than a tiny fraction of a second. The ship never leaves the normal universe nor enters any form of hyperspace. Some of the things to consider when choosing a jump drive include, where can the drive be used? Many jump drives can only be used at jump points, specific locations in space. Jump points may only occur naturally. They may be relics of a prior civilization, or they may be necessary to build them in order to use FTL travel. If jump points are necessary, they may be located far away from planets or other interesting places, requiring long trips through normal space to reach them. A jump drive can then be used anywhere. It can be a plot-breaking convenience, making travel or escape too easy for drama. If there are jump points, how can they be arranged? Perhaps a starship can jump to any number of different places so long as it starts as a jump point. If a starship jumps to a region of space with no jump points, it may be stranded. Or possibly jump points are always connected in pairs, so that when a ship triggers its drive at one end, it always moves to the other end. Paired jump points can create a network of jump lines in known space, which the real distances between stars are less important than the conveniences of their jump point links. Stars without jump points are inaccessible, while jump lines without stars at each end are not useful. Stars with several jump points become important crossroads, even if they don't have habitable or useful planets. How are jump points created? If jump points have a natural phenomenon or were built by a prior civilization, then starships will need to search for them, and the first trip through will be a major voyage of discovery. If a jump point must be created with special equipment, then that equipment must be located on a stationary facility, a Stargate. That equipment might be located on a stationary facility, a Stargate that can send starships to their destination without moving itself. How is the jump drive triggered? Does it simply take the application of energy, or does it require the use of special computer programs, psionic powers, or other rare items? Those who control the ability to trigger a jump point will control interstellar travels. What happens if a jump fails? A jump ship may be stranded if it appears in a space without jump points, or if some jump lines are only one way. Perhaps planning a jump requires a great deal of computation, and bad aim can send a ship anywhere. Do jump points point only across space, or do they permit time travel? Some jump drive schemes permit travel through time as well as space. Starships can visit the distant past or the distant future of the universe. A ship that curves back through time can end up changing its own past or dropping into an alternate universe where events just turned out differently. Jump navigation errors could even be more dangerous in such a setting. Daniel says it could be both. The energy could well prevent jumps close by, but required to pull out. Oh, yeah, that's interesting. You could use the stars to help bring you out of hyperspace or out of a jump. I think Moat and God's Eye used jump lines. Babylon 5, Tomocrat says, idea of jump points and hyperdrive is my favorite. Time and distance is always varied because of the two different dimensions. So you can adjust the time duration to your liking, i.e. travel is the speed of plot. Moat in God's Eye does use jump lines and stellar masses, which means sometimes a jump point comes out inside a star. Ew. So wormhole or keyhole drive. Wormhole drives are effectively jump drives in which the jump points are artificial. Wormholes are predicted by modern physics. They are tunnels through space that connect distant points. Some quantum mechanical models of space claim that tiny wormholes are constantly appearing and disappearing at the smallest scales. With a great deal of power, it might be possible to catch a wormhole that would connect to a desired destination and then force it to open wide enough to accommodate a starship. Current theory suggests that wormholes are likely to collapse catastrophically when an object tries to enter them. It might take a great deal of power to hold one open. Perhaps a Stargate installation is needed at one or both ends, both to create and to hold open a wormhole. In this case, a starship doesn't need any special drives at all. It can use a maneuver drive to reach and then pass through the wormhole. Alternatively, a starship may have the equipment and power needed to find, expand, and hold open a wormhole as needed. Such a keyhole drive is likely to be very expensive and dangerous. If the wormhole collapses while the ship is in transit, the result is likely to be catastrophic destruction. Kind of sounds like a sub undergoing implosion. Tomocrat says, I've seen some books that use stellar masses as kind of a train track for warp travel. I like in 40K. I don't know much about 40K. I like 40K in which traveling through gates may change you. Some serious suggestions have been made for malfunctioning and for manufacturing and using wormholes falling into the realm of fairly rigorous sci-fi. One proposal requires each end to be held open by a ring of superdense matter, massing about as much as the solar system and spinning at nearly the speed of light. Wow. These requirements would seem to go beyond any but the most powerful and advanced civilizations, but perhaps an as yet unknown science will find shortcuts to make this idea feasible. A probability drive. This variant on the jump drive relies on the inherent uncertainty of quantum mechanics. Even an object as massive as Starship can be treated as a quantum level entity, its location and velocity uncertain. When the probability drive is engaged, the ship is no longer likely to be at its origin point and instead becomes very likely to be located at the destination. The drive may be controlled by psionic talents, using the observer effect of quantum physics to trigger the drive. Perhaps drives in fiction tend to be very dangerous, especially since they can't always be controlled. A ship suffering a drive mishap may end up anywhere, nowhere, or everywhere at once. If interstellar transport gates, if teleportation is available and has interplanetary or interstellar range, then it can be used to move people and cargo through space. The details of teleportation systems have a profound effect on the flavor of the setting. If teleportation requires massive facilities and can't be used near a star or world, then it becomes a Stargate system and spaceships are still necessary. Cheaper and more flexible teleportation makes starships less likely. At its extreme, teleportation portals can be part of everyday life. A single house can have rooms on different planets. Nolan Inquisitor says, my 2 cents, GURPS Space 4E is great at science-splaining, talking shop to GMs, but severely lacks in usability. No Starship rules is a cardinal sin. So, yeah, this is a big book. Let's talk about that for a second. This is a big book, and several of its books do that. Like Thaumatology does that as well. It like eases you into, I guess you could say, eases you into these kinds of things. It does tell you a lot about this. But there is, if you want spaceship design, there's just a book called, I need to shut this door over here. There is a book that is just GURPS spaceships that I want to look at. I think we'll look at that next. I think we need to look at that. We need to look at that next, because I think this is more. There's going to be rules for world building and solar system building in here. But yeah, you're right. Not starship building, which is arguably a problem. Lynn says it's a big bag of suggestions for star travel, but it does have some more concrete rules for world building. So warp drive. Another way to get around Einstein is to warp the geometry of normal space so that 2 points that are usually vast distances apart, at least temporarily, much closer together. To warp the geometry of space so that 2 points that are usually vast distances apart, at least temporarily, much closer together. A ship can then move from origin to destination through normal space and still reach the destination without ever approaching the speed of light. In practice, this means the starship surrounds itself with some kind of energy field that lets it move at faster than light speeds with respect to the unwarped space. If the drive malfunctions, the ship loses its faster than light speed, but it keeps the normal space velocity it had before the warp drive was activated. When choosing a warp drive for a space setting, here are some things to consider. How fast is the drive? With hyperdrive, the GM should consider how long will it take the warp drive ship to make the typical journey between stars. Where can the drive be used? Perhaps a warp drive can only reach faster than light speeds in deep space, close to worlds or other large masses. The warp drive drops to slower than light speeds or stops working altogether. Perhaps the ship must accelerate to close to light speed using normal space drives before engaging the warp drives. Or possibly the warp drive is dangerous to use except in uncrowded space. A warp drive ship can't use its drive close to a planet or star. It will need a maneuver drive as well. Impulse power. How well can a warp drive ship interact with normal space? Some variations of the warp drive permit full interaction. Now, that's actually a problem with our warp drive thought that it's very difficult for the ship to communicate or interact with space outside a warp bubble, as I understand it, which means it's difficult to even turn the warp drive off. Some variations on the warp drive permit full interaction. Sensors can scan nearby space, ships can maneuver at will, and battles can be fought in warp. Other variations, including at least one proposed in-world physics, calls for a ship in warp to be almost completely cut off from the rest of the universe. That's what I thought the current sort of harder science understanding was. Such a warp drive means the ship can't see out of its warp bubble, can't steer, and may even be not able to turn the warp drive off without aid. Okay, so that is what I was thinking. A warp drive like this may be much like a hyperdrive that permits sensors in normal space to detect the moving ship, but which the ship is otherwise out of contact until it leaves warp. So inertialess drive. The variation of the warp drive this variation was first invented by E. Doc Smith. A device negates the inertia of the ship's matter, thereby abolishing Newton's laws of motion. The ship's speed is now limited only by the strength of its maneuver drive and the friction of the medium it's flying through. Ships are highly streamlined in order to reduce friction. In a planet's atmosphere, the ship is extremely fast. In the high vacuum of interstellar space, speeds many times that of light are possible, assuming that, of course, the inertialess ship isn't subject to Einstein's laws either. A ship can instantly stop or change direction, turning on a dime in the manner of some UFOs reportedly can. Oh, interesting. And inertialess ships are immune to collision and explosion damage. A collision stops the ship dead at its point of impact, and an explosion simply bats the ship aside like a piece of thistledown. In reality, there's no reason to believe that an inertialess object could break Einstein's laws. An inertialess object may be equivalent to a massless object, requiring to move at exactly the speed of light, like other objects with no rest mass. Blink warping, space highways. Some real-world science suggests that warp drives may actually be possible, although the power requirements would be extremely high. One proposal suggests that specific paths through space could be treated to permit faster-than-light travel. While staying on this space highway, a ship can move at faster-than-light speeds in the normal universe. The drawback is that it can't reverse course or leave the highway until it reaches its destination. A space travel highway system is rather like a jump line system in which the ships take measurable time to complete each jump. Ships on a highway may or may not be able to detect one another or interact. If a highway is very narrow, the probability of collision may be high enough to worry about. So, designing a star drive. Once the GM has chosen a general type for his faster-than-light drive, he can customize it with a variety of options. These decisions are important as they provide much of the campaign's flavor. Reliability of the drive. Astrogation. Drive speed. Comparative speed, maximum range, fuel consumption. Side effects. Let's look at navigation errors. What happens when a starship goes off course? Slower than light starships and those using warp drive are unlikely to get lost since they can always see where they're going. Jump drives and hyperdrive ships could go wildly off course, especially if a power plant or star drive malfunctions in mid-journey. In general, an astrologer should roll against the appropriate navigation specialty modified as the GM sees fit to reflect the difficulty of interstellar astrogation. A hurriedly set course relative to the time usually requires gives a penalty roll. A success means there was no error. The consequence of a failure depends on the magnitude. The GM should custom build his own failure table appropriate for the drive he's designed. Players should not be allowed to see this table, although they may know what the general results of a minor error will be. If the penalties for miscalculating are low, then starships escaping from danger will always use quick and dirty computations. As consequences become more severe, snap astrogation becomes more of an emergency measure. Some possibilities include nothing happens, off position, lost. Astronomy or navigation rolls are required to figure out exactly even where the ship is. time lost, damage to the ship or drive, total disaster. Let's see. What do we want to look at in time we've got left? Let's go back up to the table of contents and see where we were. So we just went through maneuver drives and star drives, shipboard systems, control systems, life support, gravity, weapons. Oh, people probably want to look at weapons, defenses, sensors, communications, power, laboratories, infrastructure, and small craft. Technology, adding miracles, technology areas. And then we get into basic world building. Okay, well, let's see what some of these other systems. Let's just scroll through some of the other systems. Oh, see, we see math here. See, it's giving you the in-depth stuff on world building. Probably have to start the world building tomorrow. So let's see if we can get to the world building. So these are other things that can be on board your ship. So like gravity, for instance. Gravity is one of the fundamental forces of the universe and has also turned out to be the hardest force to manipulate. Today, the only known way to produce gravity is to pile up a lot of mass. There's no known way to screen against it, reducing an object's weight or making it weightless. Still, there's less known about any way to reverse gravity. Gravity controls, gravitrix or gravitonics is still a dream and should be considered a super science technology. Spin gravity, a space habitat that can be rotated to provide artificial gravity through centrifugal force. A spaceship can do the same, either by rotating as a unit or by spinning a specific section. Spin gravity is available even at very low tech levels, but has a number of disadvantages. The rotation gives rise to the Coriolis effect, which seems to push objects to the side as they fall. This can be difficult for travelers to adjust to. Coriolis effects can cause severe disorientation if the radius of the spin is too small, so the ship or the rotating section needs to be fairly large. Meanwhile, there may be many reasons why the whole ship can't rotate, such as in order to hold the aim of a shipboard weapon. Unfortunately, conservation of angular momentum means that if one section of the ship begins to rotate, the rest of the ship will normally rotate in the opposite direction. This can be avoided, but it also adds to the complexity of the system. Yeah, that also seems like something that's better for a space station than a starship. Sable Phoenix says, we've all seen what happens when mid-journey malfunctions. You end up with no fingers or way too many. Worst result of a failed jump you can imagine. Oh, Sable Phoenix is saying gravity is not a force. It is the curvature of space-time. Lynn wants to make sure we're talking about so that's our life support, right? No coffee making equipment. You just need two counter rotating sections on board the ship. So artificial gravity, an artificial gravity generator is a device that somehow produces a gravitational field without lots of mass. This violates physical laws as they are currently understood and must be considered super science. If a setting has artificial gravity, this has a number of effects in the campaign. Spaceships and starships and stations will no longer need to be built with rotating sections to generate spin gravity. They can be given any shape desired, and in particular, no longer need to be shaped like rings or cylinders. Settlements on asteroids, comets, and other bits of space debris will become easy. The presence of variant human races adapted to microgravity or to unusual gravity fields will be much less likely. A variation on artificial gravity is the gravitic or inertial compensator, a device that renders the force of high gravity or high acceleration harmless. We like having those when we're going to warp speed. Compensators can make space travel much more comfortable, even on spaceships with very powerful maneuver drives. Manned ships, especially fighter craft, will be able to make sharp turns at high velocity, letting them dogfight, as we've seen in many science fiction films. Contragravity is a means of screening out gravity, in effect the reverse of artificial gravity. The main effect of contragravity is to allow things to fly without regard to aerodynamics and without noisy engines. Instead of being light and fragile like helicopters or jet planes, vehicles can be quite heavy like grav tanks or even flying houses or cities. Is that how the hover hover carrier. I think about that hover carrier in Marvel a lot. I only saw it once in some movie, but I was like, oh my God, what does it take to make a aircraft carrier levitate? Mike says, wasn't there a study that said if you accelerated gravity 32 feet per second, gravity would feel constant, and in 1 year you'd be at light speed? I don't know how long that would take. That's probably someplace in here that if, as long as you're accelerating at 1g, right, you would feel constant, right, and you would experience 1g worth of gravity. But I think the problem there is that actually sounds pretty good, except for I think the problem there is the energy, right? Sable Phoenix says the Vsauce video, Which Way is Down, is the best layman's description I've ever seen about space-time and gravity and how relativity links them. I'll look that up. Vsauce video, Which Way is Down. Okay, I think I found it. We'll check that out later. If contragravity generators can be made small enough, they can allow personal flying belts or even flying carpets. Contragravity can be dramatic and futuristic. On the other hand, if it becomes too easy to fly, there's not much point in driving, sailing, or walking. The simpler and more portable flight technology is, the more adventurers will use it. This can short-circuit a lot of adventures. It's hard to get excited about a man against nature adventure when the heroes must cross 1,000 miles of barren, monster-infested wilderness if they can just strap on their flight belts and fly. Of course, the contragravity may be unreliable and may fail at just the wrong moment, but it can become tiresome if the GM develops a habit of depriving the adventurers of crucial technology. Lynn, Lynn's coming in with this. Lynn says 347.22 days to reach light speed at 1G. So there we go. Sounds pretty good. Lynn says that's a gross oversimplification because it becomes non-linear near the speed of light. So if space travel ever becomes common, spaceships will sooner or later begin shooting at each other. This choice of what shipboard weapons are most common will do a lot to determine the flavor of the setting. So projectile weapons. One of the oldest ways to damage any vehicle is to throw physical projectiles at it. A missile that simply collides with an enemy ship uses the kinetic kill technique. A missile can carry a warhead, high explosives, or nuclear device, bomb-pumped lasers, nanotechnological goo, anything that can damage an enemy ship at a short distance. One of the fundamental problems with a projectile weapon is how to aim them. The problem is particularly bad for an unguided projectile, which can't alter its course to follow the enemy. Unguided projectiles, such as those fired by a cannon or railgun, will need to be very fast or very short range. Guided missiles will need to be much faster than the ship they target and will need to be smart to outguess the enemy pilot. Alternatively, beam weapons, high-energy lasers, particle beams, gravity beams, or bolts of energetic plasma are great candidates for beam weapons. Beam weapons can help with the aiming problem in space combat. Lasers, gravity pulses, and particle beams all move at light speed or just under it. The speed means that the enemy won't have time to evade while the beam crosses space, even if it can predict where the attack is coming. On the other hand, if a beam has to be held on its target to do significant damage, this helps the defense. A ship can simply rotate in place or make small evasive maneuvers, spreading the beam's attack across the hull. Remember that a ship's drives can sometimes be used as a weapon. Most reaction drives generate hot plasma or other dangerous exhaust, which could be directed at an enemy vessel. The faster and more efficient drive, the more energetic the exhaust, all the way up to the output from antimatter scion or pion drives, which can be deadly at distances of millions of miles. Good old humanity. How common is space travel? Well, have they begun shooting at each other yet? Yeah. So, or exotic weapons. Super science technologies that drive a ship can also lead to super science methods for attacking or defending it. Any bad effect that might occur on a side effect of a drive might also be deliberately inflicted on an enemy vessel. Perhaps a gravity drive can be used to project gravity fields to an enemy ship, burning out enemy drives or damaging the enemy's hull. A different application of hyperdrive technology might make it impossible for enemy ships to escape into hyperspace. If a ship uses psionics to trigger an interplanetary jump. It may be vulnerable to telepathic or telekinetic attack. So defenses can include armor. Yeah, it did. I wonder if it was a space issue. You're talking about rules for starships, because it seems like starships are so important in this book. But it also makes me wonder, did they just put all of the description of starships into this book and then go over here to starships, to the other starships book, to put all of the rules basically for the different design here? So we do have armor, because I was just thinking about that. I'll bring up that book just to show you here in just a second. Many science fiction universes include some kind of force field, an energy barrier that can project a ship or some other target protect it from incoming projectiles or beams. Force fields can be useful technology when establishing a setting's flavor. First, force fields can allow individuals or vehicles to look unprotected, but in fact be well shielded against enemy fire or hostile environments. A tiny shield belt is so much more elegant than a bulky armored suit. Second, force fields allow the GM to control what weaponry is likely to be in use. For a Swords and Starships campaign, the GM can rule that force fields block explosions and fast-moving projectiles, but are ineffective against slow-moving hand weapons. That was the Dune thing, right? For a campaign in which nuclear weapons are rare, rule that force screens provide thousands of times their normal resistance against nuclear explosions. To limit teleportation technology, rule that teleporters can't reach through a force field. Stealth and cloaking sensors. Let's see. I'm going to bring up the starships. I want to look at starships in detail later, but I'm going to go ahead and show you what's in GURPS starships. I was looking at it the other day. Tomocrat says Sir Isaac Newton. Sir Isaac Newton is the most deadly mother in the Space Private. The best line in Mass Effect. Eventually, you just put enough kinetic energy on something. Where did my starships go? Oh, GURPS starships right here. So GURPS starships is 73 pages. Well, GURPS starship is quite a bit right here. So it says that GURPS spaceships is the GURPS spaceships is the companion to GURPS space, presenting rules for tech levels 7 to 12 spacecraft, from tiny lifeboats to giant dreadnoughts. It covers space design, travel, and operations, along with a mapless space combat system. So if you want to design your ship, take this a bit further. I would say that this book is is a necessary companion to GURPS. The GURPS space. This is GURPS space, right? So we've got spacecraft. This doesn't go into all of the explanation of what it is, but like spacecraft systems, page 8. Because I want to design one. We can design one. As I've done that before. I just, for the fun of it, I said I'm designed a starship with GURPS spacecraft. Because you've got to, like, here's the Starflower class Tramp Starfighter. So this one does have more crunch here. Tech level 11, and then that right there means super science as well. This is a fast freighter, designed for operations in frontier regions with primitive port facilities. Its reactionless drive gives it enough thrust to blast off from a planetary surface or elude custom patrols or pirates. It is a SM size +8 streamlined hull. It masses 1,000 tons and is 75 yards long. And so this is how it built this. Systems table, metallic laminate armor, cargo hold, another cargo hold, front hull, cargo hold, lots of cargo, enhanced array, control room, habitat, 6 cabins intended for passengers, habitat, 4 cabins, 2 sick bay beds intended for crew, standard reactionless drive engine, 1G of acceleration. There we go, 1G of acceleration right there. Standard reactionless drive engine, 1G of acceleration, plus a star drive engine for faster than light travel, engine room, core. Like how many? You also have to consider how many points of power your starship is taking. So fusion reactor here provides 2 power points worth of power to this ship. So you got to look at the size, how much power you're generating, and so forth. It's a fun system, but I would agree that this book right here is a necessary component or compendium to have with GURPS Space, because you're going to want to design spacecraft. And so all of the GURPS rules for that are here, like ice armor. This armor is made from frozen water. It may be used to represent spacecraft built from hollowed out comets or Kuiper belt objects, although ice is sometimes added atop other armor as cheap shielding for space stations. Ice armor systems provide ablative DDR that provides the hull sections, protects the hull sections it's installed on. Ice armor is not available for SM5 to SM7 hulls, nor for streamlined hulls. Cost is negligible. Alternatively, armor, you could armor your spacecraft in stone, or armor steel. Armor light alloy. Armor metallic laminate. Armor advanced metallic laminate. Armor nanocomposite. Armor organic. Armor diamondoid. And then here's the cargo bay. So this is what you're putting in. Cloaking device. Contragravity lifter. So this is taking everything we were just reading and putting it into some actual rules for design. There are 7 GURPS spaceship books. Good morning, Andrew. This must also be from the quotes here, must be from Mass Effect. There are 7 GURPS spaceship books. Oh, there are. So this is the main book. I see. So spaceships, this is the main book that I've got. But then there's also Spaceships 2, Traders, Liners, and Passports. Spaceships 3, Warships and Space Pilots. Spaceships 4, Fighters, Carriers, and Mecha. Spaceships 5, Exploration and Colony Spacecraft. This is Spaceships. Spaceship 6, Mining and Industrial Spacecraft. Spaceships 7, Divergent and Paranormal Tech. And then Spaceships 8, Transhuman Space. So, okay, so there is a lot of information specifically on spacecraft. So, like warships and space pirates, the battle klaxons have sounded. Warships and space pirates provide ships and game mechanics for exciting space combat between medium and large vessels. It includes an overview of space navy and pirate operations. It also features GURPS spaceship statistics for dozens of sample warships. So if you need sample ships, I guess all of these come with pre-built ships. From patrol ships and frigates to star cruisers and battleships, tactical maneuvering rules expand the GURPS spaceship's combat system to handle hex-based combat and chases using counters or miniatures. Actually, I might have to look at that one. That looks fun. Does this cover a blade of armor? Yes. Tomocrat says each books are there for different types of fighters, miners, feats, freighters, etc. Well, there's probably a lot to look at then. We'll get into the world design tomorrow, but I think it'll be fun also to go into spaceships and do a design. Maybe try to design one of these. Maybe try to design a Tic Tac ship. Design a theoretical Tic Tac ship or a classic UFO. That might be fun. And then calculate how long it will take to get it from here to Zeta Reticuli. Make sure it's got enough star drive capacity to do that. All right. Well, I'm out of here. I've got things I've got to do. And then in just a few hours, I'm going over to my brother's house. I got to go get a haircut and run some other errands. But then I got to go be over at my brother's house to try out this game of Kings of War. So I will let you know how that goes. I hope everybody has a fantastic day. Be creative, be constructive, and grind on. See you later.